Cochise County covers about 78 miles of the southern border. So you'll watch on television all the various people coming over the border in droves. And you'll see that's happening in New Mexico and in Texas. In the Tucson sector, which is the 78-mile sector, is covered by probably, there's about 24 people work for the Cochise County Sheriff's Office. And they cover that 78 miles. What they explained is across that section of the border is where the cartel sends all the criminals. And so why would they be sending our criminals? Because the Colombian cartels, and there's a number of them, operate a number of safe houses throughout the United States. If you were to research it on the internet and look at some of the cartel safe houses, they clutter the United States just like our cities do. Why is that? So if I'm coming from Venezuela and I want to get across the border, nobody comes across the border without the permission of the cartel or to pay the cartel. And so it costs about $6,000 for somebody to come from Venezuela, as an example, into the United States. It's not that the people coming across are wealthy, it's the cartel charges that amount. They'll have to pay that eventually, but they bring them across the border. And once they come across the border, how they set that up is, for instance, on the 78 miles of the Tucson sector, there is 3 people for the cartel that run the Mexican border in that sector. There's someone in charge of everybody that comes across. There's a finance director, and there's a social media director. The cartel is very organized. And so the social media person will put out alerts to people in the United States, messages, and says, listen, if you come down to the border and pick people up, we'll let you know where to pick them up at, and we'll pay you about $3,000 a person to pick them up and bring them back to Phoenix, which is about 4 hours away. So if somebody says they'll do that, they send them a mile marker, and they tell them, stop at this mile marker along the border, and people will come out of the weeds and get into your car and then drive them to Phoenix. When they get them, and they tell them this, and you'll see that there's a lot of accents, because they'll tell, because it's young kids who are under 16, many of them, who are taking their parents' cars, they'll tell them, listen, if you get chased by the police, don't stop. Get up to 120 miles an hour and they'll call off the chase. And so, obviously, they're very young, can't control their cars, and there's many serious accidents that result in that. But if they get back to the Phoenix area, they'll leave the people there and they'll say, well, where's my $3,000? They'll say, well, we'll give you $300 for each person. Well, you said $3,000. Well, if you go back and pick up more, we'll give you more money. And so that's the whole enticement. So when somebody gets here, they'll set them up at a place to work. And they'll take half their check. Now, obviously, they're not getting paid much, so they'll take half their check. Then they'll set them up in a place to live where they charge them rent. Recently was on the news, there was an abandoned hotel the cartel took over in the United States, and were housing people in this abandoned hotel and charging them $1,000 a month rent. And so that money goes to the cartel also, until that debt's paid back. If you don't pay the debt, and you don't want to work, then you'll run drugs for them. And so drugs are run up the east and west coast. And what's concerning to us is when they talk about human trafficking, everybody thinks, well, it's a little kid, and they're human trafficking these people. They're human trafficking adults. They're, and children and women across the border. And so they'll run drugs for them. And so you have this big syndicate, which is, so if you look at my Italian heritage, it was always the mafia in the 40s and the 50s that was running the drug trade in the United States. It's not the mafia anymore, it's the cartels. And so they're running this massive drug trade. Also what they're bringing up, the criminals they're bringing across are cartel members who will run these safe houses and punish people who don't follow their orders. And so this is all being operated, unfortunately, across the United States. In February, I went to the National Sheriff's Conference. I'm part of the Governmental Affairs Committee and the Legal Affairs Committee. But I also went to the border sheriffs. And what the border sheriff said is every sheriff in the United States today is a border sheriff. Because all the various illegals who have come across the border are in every state in the United States. Their concern is also, so if you look at statistics, and statistics are all whatever you want to make them to be, but if we were to say 10 million people have come across through these checkpoints, it's estimated that over 2 million are known gotaways. And they come across places like the Tucson sector. And so these are serious criminals who are coming into the United States. And it's not just people from Mexico or from Venezuela, but from 147 different countries in the world have come across the border. When went to the border sheriffs, was able to see films. As an example, the Texas sheriffs were chasing a SUV of illegals. And so they were chasing them high speed, and they got tied up in a massive car backup on the freeway. As they surrounded the car, they took out their automatic weapons from inside that SUV and blew out the back window, and then just started shooting at everybody in the area. They said this is not unusual to see this. It's not televised much, but it's not unusual to see this because these are known criminals. Everybody coming across the border is a criminal? No. There's a lot of people coming from really
It's against the law to come across the border.
Pardon?
You're a criminal if they come across the border and don't have permission.
So all these people are not drug dealers that are coming across, but there are a lot of criminals who are coming across the border and infiltrating throughout the United States. When I was at the National Sheriffs, we met, sheriffs met with the Israeli Defense Forces. And they had a presentation about the attacks of October 7th in Israel. What they explained is that wasn't a spur of the moment thing. It was planned for 5 years. And when they were coming across into Israel, they would come across every day because they had passes to come in and shop in Israel. They knew everybody, but at the same time, they were checking out everything that was going on there. So when they came across the border again in Israel, when Hamas attacked, they knew exactly where they were going and what they were doing. I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, we had to give up our cell phones and even my watch and everything because they showed us 45 minutes of body cam footage. And the body cam footage was people, Hamas wore these body cams. They showed it from car cameras, house cameras about the attack because they filmed everything. And it was some of the most horrific footage I've ever seen in terms of
depravity.
I remember one where you see a man and his two young sons go running out of their house. They're all in their underwear. They run into what seems to be a shelter that they had, and you see one of the Hamas guys comes out, throws a grenade into there, blows that up, and the two little boys come out. They're bleeding. They go into their kitchen. They're sitting there crying because they have the house footage, and there's a translation coming up. The one boy's eyes blown out. Just really horrific. And you see this Hamas guy come in, and he just opens the refrigerator, starts eating their food like they weren't even there. In another part of the footage, there's a family that was eating breakfast. They came in, they tortured the parents in front of the kids, dismembered them, and then killed them, and then killed the children, and then sat down and ate their breakfast. What the IDF tried to explain to us is these individuals hate Jews, but they also hate everyone in the United States just as much. And what they explained to us is we're already in the United States. The IDF explained and said the only ones that stopped the Hamas attack that day were the police officers on the street. They said our military didn't respond for 6 to 8 hours. They think everybody thinks the military is everywhere. They're not. They didn't respond for 6 to 8 hours. And they said it was the police officers on the street that held off that attack. They said, unfortunately, the police were armed just like policemen on the street, with a handgun and a couple magazines that they wore. They quickly ran out of ammunition because they were unprepared for this attack. They didn't think that would happen. I remember, and there's a lot of debate about people from Gaza, and I remember one scene where they were throwing people that they had blown up. There was a girl missing her leg. There was a bunch of other people thrown into the back of this pickup truck, and they drove into Gaza. And people came from everywhere. Women, men, children, and they whipped these people out of the truck and beat them to death, and it was merciless. The barbarism that you saw there is something I don't think we as a nation can fathom. We just don't think people can do that. But the reality is there are people that exist, and they're willing to do that. We saw it recently with the attack in Russia at the music theater or the opera or whatever it was, and 140 people that were killed there. This is something that terrorists have no problem doing, and they think they're justified in doing that. My concern as the sheriff is I don't think we as a nation are prepared or can fathom that this is possible in our country today. But what we don't know is the unknowns. So what we're trying to do is trying to increase, number one, how we're able to respond. And so as the sheriff here in Lake County, one of the things that we did with our sheriff's office is we're changing how our deputies on the street are prepared, how they're armed, what they have, and the type of training. You know, I've been with the sheriff's office for 36 years. For so many of those years, once a month or once a quarter, you went down, you looked at a standing target, and you did 3 magazines and make sure it's in the target area, and targets don't move. And the type of training that's needed today is not to shoot at a paper target. We have to train, unfortunately, our police officers on the street to be tactically prepared. That seems very militaristic. It's not militaristic, it's the fact of that's what it is today. And so one of the first things I did as sheriff, our deputies carried a shotgun and a handgun. And so you had a deputy that was showing up, and the people they might be confronting had automatic rifles. So one of the first things we did was we put an automatic rifle in everybody's car and armed them appropriately. And now, fortunately, over the past 2 years, we were able to redo our training center. If you went out to our range, it was paper targets, and we had a old mobile home that was captured and taken in a drug deal. You could push the walls, and they would move out, and you could see the ground underneath that was dilapidated. So what we were able to do is we saved that. We have that trailer on the wall now. No, we don't have a trailer now. We threw it away. It's in the dump. And we built a new range. And so now we have a facility, one that has classrooms, and it's wired to have cameras so we can bring in classes or send out classes. Has self-defense training. It has a large screen, probably as long as that wall set up, and it's a video system. And so the deputy is confronted by individuals that are on film. Very realistic, and they have to respond. They have to talk their way through situations, they have to talk their way through, or they may have to take some type of action with that individual. It's real-time training. We built another building, and in that building we have movable walls. And so basically how police officers are trained, they can go down and shoot at targets, then move in, meet that screen and deal with that, then move into simulation and use simulations to engage people in an armed environment. That's the type of training we need today. And so one of the things that I was able to work with the commissioners is it's not only the sheriff's office that uses that now. We have 2 highly trained deputies that run that facility. And so every police department in Lake County has access to come and use that facility for training. We offer classes there. We offer any number of things. The various SWAT teams in Lake County have used that as a training facility. So my hope as sheriff is to increase the ability of every police officer in every community in Lake County to not only be able to be better prepared to respond to armed situations, but also we're having classes what to look for. Next week, we have a retired lieutenant colonel is going to talk on terrorism. We're going to offer a 4-hour class in the morning and a 4-hour class in the afternoon. It's free for law enforcement to attend. And he's going to explain what terrorism is, what the misnomers are for terrorism, and some of the things to look for. We're going to follow that up by having the Border Patrol come in and explain more about what to look for on traffic stops. One of the things that we're involved in as the Lake County Sheriff's Office is a thing called Stone Garden. And Stone Garden is a federal grant, and so we work with Willoughby, Menor, Willoughby Hills, a lot of people on Interstate 90 and Route 2, and so we do interdiction. And so we used to receive about $350,000 to pay for that each year. And we spread that out for the officers to use that. That's been cut in half because that money has been filtered to the southern border. So one of the arguments that I did in the Governmental Affairs Committee was I argued to the Department of Justice, you need to return that funding back to the northern border. I'm glad to say this, our Stone Garden unit is one of the most active in the United States. And why it's active is because when they go out, they're doing something. Some law enforcement, unfortunately, use it as a cash cow for overtime in different places. We don't see it that way. We need to be out there. We need to be looking for what is going on in Lake County. What are the dangers presented to us? And so I think there's multiple threats that are out there. I think there's multiple threats from the cartel and the trafficking that's going on. We, about a year and a half ago, raided a cartel house right in Painesville City. And when that house was raided, it was a duplex, so the warrant was only for the top portion of that. They were tipped off before we got there, but when the SWAT team went in, there was still food on the table and guns at the windows, and they had gotten out. Now, there was a traffic stop done in Pennsylvania for the drugs and things. But when they went downstairs, what they found was a packing house to pack drugs for distribution. And so this was sitting right here in Painesville, and we think it's the southern border. It's not just the southern border. And so there is a significant criminal element that is not only peddling drugs, but peddling money and controlling a lot of different places. There are sections already where immigration has put individuals from other countries intentionally. If you go to Columbus has a very large Somalian population. And Somalia is just not that great a place in terms of the United States. Dearborn, Michigan is another place. And so what is key about those areas is the communities are very tight. And so people who aren't looking in the best interest of the United States, for us as individuals, can hide within those communities and go undetected by what we're creating as a nation. And so those are concerns that we have. And I think that we're trying to address a lot of those issues across the United States, but I can't control what goes on in Texas, I can't control what goes on in Tennessee or Michigan, but we can have an impact here by bringing all law enforcement in Lake County into a more collaborative group. So we had a meeting with the Lake County chiefs at our range. We talked about terrorism and made plans of moving forward, what we can do to train our people to respond to terrorism in those threats that exist today. I think it's just a matter of, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that's going to happen. We just need to be prepared to respond to that. As well, there's a change in terms of the judicial system, depending on where you live and how they look at crime. 47% of the felonies committed in Lake County, that's the serious crimes, 47% are committed by people who live outside of Lake County. And so, as an example, one of my sons is with the Willoughby Hills Police Department. And one night they had a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, two 14-year-olds, and a 12-year-old stealing cars in Willoughby Hills. One of the kids had his eye shot out 3 weeks previous, stealing cars in Cuyahoga County. And so they caught them, arrested them, and the parents came in, and the parents they said, we don't know what to do, because the kids get arrested and they get released the same day. The West End departments will tell you, they'll arrest somebody that's come to do crime in Lake County, and they'll say, I'll just get out to right away. And they'll say, no, you're not, you're going to the Lake County jail. And they're like, oh, I didn't know I was in Lake County, I thought I was in Cuyahoga County. And what we have, and I've said this for a long time, we need strong police, we need a strong prosecutor's office, and we need strong courts. And so when those three links fail, anywhere along the way, then Lake County becomes a prime place to look for, to bring crime. And so that's what we have to do as a criminal justice committee, is work to make sure we have strong police, work to make sure our prosecutor's office, which is overwhelmed by the number of cases, some of the money that's being provided in other jurisdictions is overwhelming. If you talk to the prosecutor says, I can't get any prosecutors to apply here in Lake County because we don't pay them enough. They can make $20,000 more a year being in Cuyahoga County as assistant prosecutors. What that means is you lose experience. And so it takes 3 to 4 years to train an assistant prosecutor to come in. If you're always training people, you're always dealing with people that don't have enough knowledge to handle the issues that we're confronted with. And so I think those are things that have to stay at our forefront. We need strong judges, and fortunately we have very good judges here in Lake County. And we need to make sure that we keep strong judges here, that give fair trials, that if somebody is mentally ill, and there's a lot of mentally ill people in the community, we need to get them treatment. We need to get people who are addicted treatment, but also hold them accountable. Just because you're addicted doesn't mean it's okay to commit crime. We have to get them treatment, and if they refuse treatment, then there has to be consequences for that. There's a law in Ohio, and it's, for instance, if a police officer stops you and you have heroin on you, I have to say, do you want treatment? Yes. Okay, in the next 30 days you gotta get treatment. Okay, I promise. And then you gotta let them go. If it's a small enough amount, not major trafficking, I mean just personal usage. Well, if I get you again, then I can take you to jail. But the problem is I have to get you again. Because you might go to Fairport, and they might get you, and you might go to Wycliffe, and they might get you, and they might go to Menor. If we're not sharing that information with each other, then people can bop around and get caught repeatedly and never go to jail.
Why isn't that on the record?
Because that's unfair. You're really cruel. And the whole point is that we have to try to get people treatment. But the bigger problem is not why that is, why aren't we sharing information? And so we need to create, I think, databases as law enforcement at a central location. So if you're picked up and you're offered that, we need to let other people know. So if they pull you over again, no, we already know that you got it. We need to be able to do that and create better systems of information, because trafficking is an issue.
So couldn't it easily be patterned after what the doctor's offices use, Epic? So if you have chronic ulcers, you live in Cleveland, but you're visiting somebody in Columbus and you pass out in the store, they can pull up your medical records.
It's tough enough to do that just in Lake County, let alone make that for every county.
No, but I'm saying our county could pattern that kind of a program, I think.
And it requires substantial investments in computer technology. The Lake County Sheriff's Office has a JMS system, jail management system, that we book people in and out of jail. We have an RMS package, a records management, so when the police officer's in the street, put that into the computer, it goes into the database. Then we have CAD, computer-aided dispatch, out at our dispatch center. Each of those systems to put in is about $2 million. I believe technology is bankrupting law enforcement, because everybody thinks that if he gets shot, I can go up with my phone and touch him and get his DNA, because I've seen it on TV. Well, it doesn't exist. They think when they look for fingerprints, they're floating in the air. Most people have no concept of what it takes. And here's the other issue, is when you go to trial, I didn't believe in body cameras. I thought body cameras were very costly. I thought body cameras would create a huge nightmare for public records. In 2020, changed my mind. And why that was because so many police officers were getting crucified by the press because people would make accusations and they had nothing to demonstrate that. So we invested in body cameras for the protection of law enforcement and to show that we do our job correctly all the time. It's very complicated, law enforcement today. It's not what I started out in. It's not a simple process. But it requires accountability, and law enforcement should be held accountable. They should be required to tell the truth, to write just reports, and not make up things. Knock on wood, we never lowered our standards. There were times at the Lake County Sheriff's Office, we were down. We were at one time, we had 86 corrections officers. At one time, we were down 25. Nobody was applying. We were down deputies on the street. One of the things we said, we're not lowering our standards. We'll work with less till we can hire the best people. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of great people, and those people go out and get other good people to come work for us. And that's really, I think, that's what we have to emphasize, is having good law enforcement that brings good cases to the prosecutor. And all those are key elements in fighting terrorism and fighting crime and serving the community. So that's really, hopefully that gives you some information and focus on things. Go ahead.
I'm not from Lake County, but I don't know how their sheriff's department or police departments are set up. But do you have a sheriff's brigade here?
What's a sheriff's brigade?
The sheriff's brigade is a watchdog for the citizens and also for the sheriff to see if there's any crime and corruption being done in the sheriff's department and law enforcement departments.
That's the prosecutor's office here. And if somebody makes an accusation that we've done something wrong, we have an investigator. Either our detective bureau investigates it, or we turn it over to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, or to the prosecutor's office, or to another agency to come in and investigate that.
There's no sheriff's brigade
No.
there. How about, is the FBI ever been called in on investigating? I don't care for the FBI, but is there any FBI's being called in on investigating about the drug dealing from the police officers themselves?
Not here in Lake County. We've not had accusations that any Lake County police officers, or whether it's the sheriff's office or any other, that are dealing drugs.
All right.
Yes.
The crime lab, how involved is Lake County Crime Lab in investigations on the scene? Do they send their investigators out?
They do not anymore. They, a lot of the evidence is brought to the crime labs. A lot of that on scene has been turned over to the BCI, the Bureau of Criminal Investigations. And because it's very costly, so they have large units that have all those supplies. Now we have some equipment that we've purchased and trained people on. For instance, we have 3D scanners to scan a crime scene and be able to map everything where it's at, and we're able to use that. But in terms of guns are brought to the Lake County Crime Lab to be researched, drugs and
I'm
those
hearing
types of
conflicting
things.
stories, and I'll have to do some investigation on my own on that, because they asked us to pass a levy that's generating, they've already got accumulated $7 million of excess property taxes. That amount of money, they have $1.6 million that they are accumulating from the taxpayers, that is just adding to their cash reserves. So I have some problems with that, and I will.
Well, you'd have to
investigate.
talk to them about that. I do know that we have one of the best crime labs in terms of investigations, whether that's DNA, whether that's fingerprinting, and we don't have the resources to do that. And so, I might be a general practitioner, but I'm not gonna do surgery, brain surgery. I might depend on a neurologist who's trained in doing that. And so, we need to use the resources across the county to better handle those types of things. Yes?
Go ahead.
I have one other question. Is it the state that is telling you to just release these drug offenders?
It's the law.
It's the law, it
It's the
actually
law.
is?
It's a House bill, yes.
House bill.
Yeah, that's what I was going with that. I was gonna ask if you have let's say a mandate came from the federal, all right, and you knew it was wrong, let's say, I just couldn't in good conscience do that. Do you still have to obey it? I mean, if you know something's not right for the county, do you have to do that?
So I guess it would depend on what we're talking about, that if they said go around and chop everybody's heads off, we wouldn't do that. Okay? But we have a thing called the Constitution, and the problem is, it's not being handled correctly today.
For
To
sure.
me, the legislative branch passes law, the executive branch enforces law, and that includes the Department of Justice, and then you have the judicial branch that holds trials, determines constitutionality. I mean, that's ever since Marbury versus Madison, back when Adams and Jefferson. The problem is as an example, and not to get too deep in the weeds, but it's against federal law. Federal law trumps state law. And it's against federal law to deal marijuana. But under, who was the Attorney General under Obama?
I have a mental block, I don't.
We're just not gonna do it. Eric Holder, so we're not gonna enforce federal law. That's
So you're
not
picking
the
and
role.
choosing which laws you
You
want to
can't
enforce?
pick and choose. It'd be like me pulling you over for drunk driving and say, hey, I drink too. I'm sorry you ran into him, he's bleeding, but hey, I'm on home because I'm a drinker too. I think he'd be a little upset. It's not my job to pick and choose what laws we enforce.
You just said you're not gonna enforce the federal law.
What do you mean?
Are you gonna enforce the federal law against marijuana?
We make arrests. We make arrests. I'm not gonna go deep in this,
Yeah.
into this,
Yeah, I was-
okay?
that wasn't my
Because-
intention. I just want
And
to-
so, I believe that we need to have strong legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government.
That's why I think the anti-federalists got it right. And we're living the consequence of what they said will happen if you get the type of structure that we have. Because if you're right, if you do not follow the Constitution, that breaks down the absence of law is lawlessness. It's not peace. And that's what you see.
Criminal law at the local level is not federal law. Criminal law is created by the state legislature. And that's our job as the sheriff's office to enforce criminal law at the state level. So we have to follow what the state tells us to do. And the state, through its citizens, has legalized marijuana. That's a choice. Whether or not I agree with it doesn't matter. But once that law has been passed, it's my job to enforce that. Yes,
What can the population do in general about people they highly, highly, highly suspect are here illegally? Is there anything?
call your police department. Let them know what your suspicions are and have them investigated.
But I see
Yeah.
businesses operating that clearly some of the personnel are not
How
legal.
do you know that?
Well, I'll tell you a little story. Similar to the
Well, I don't
situation.
know, how do you know specifically that person is here illegally? Did you go up and ask them for their papers?
I worked with a girl that
Did
married
you
a
ask
guy.
them for their papers?
No,
No.
we can't go around asking people for our
Exactly,
papers.
that's why if you have a suspicion, talk to the police department. Interact with your police department. I don't expect for any citizen to go out there and look for terrorists or investigate people in their neighborhoods. It's not safe.
I
Don't
had
do
a-
that. If you have suspicions, talk to your police department.
So a coworker of
If you
mine
have suspicions, talk to your police department.
got involved
Go
in
ahead.
this
Right
illegal.
now,
And
other
we-
than the police department,
I
or
don't
if you
know.
find criminal activity in the police department that's being done, who would I contact? Would it be the
Talk to the
prosecutor?
prosecutor's office.
Right, now
Talk to,
what if they're corrupt? And
move to Canada. No. I don't know really what to tell you. If you suspect your law enforcement is doing illegal things, talk to, for instance, where are you from?
I'm from Ashtabula, but this
Okay.
is a different county. I know that there's police activity that are dealing in drugs, and they're the main dealers in drugs in the town. That a county.
In Ashtabula?
No, in another county. And then we talked to the chief of police. He allowed us for being troublemakers. We went to the prosecutors, all right? We did that. We also went to some other agencies, and we ended up going to the FBI. We showed them the pictures, showed them the evidence, and there was about 30-some people that testified for it. And 2 of the police officers are doing 3 years in prison, but there's other ones that are still dealing in it. And the sheriff of the police that are doing it actually gave a blinded eye to it, and then they found him guilty, and then the judge.
Okay, so it was
judicial
handled.
review board.
So it seems like it was handled.
No, it's not all the way handled yet. Not all the way handled, it's still going on. And the police in the town know about it, and they have signs up in the town that the police are crooked, don't trust
Well,
them.
I don't know all those particulars, I can't really comment on stuff I don't have information on. So to go that deep into the weeds here is not really what I'm
Is
here
there an internal investigator that can be trusted, like in your county, to be able to take on something like that if it does happen?
Well, in Lake County, police departments assist each other in investigations. We have a prosecutor's office
Internal
that will do that.
investigations.
We have a detective bureau that investigates that.
Just in
Yeah.
case it would happen in this county, I don't know about this county too well, but I know about the other counties.
It's a great
very
county
well.
to be in. Lake County's a great county to be in. I'm really proud to be sheriff here, and we have really good citizens that are very
There's a good sheriff in
supportive
Ashtabula
of that.
County.
We
I
appreciate
just wanted
you.
to say thank you for your service and thank you for coming in and speaking to us.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate
I
it.
appreciate it. Yes, sir.
What was the
One more question.
okay. What was the reasoning behind getting rid of front license plates?
I have no idea. You'd have to talk to the state.
Wouldn't you rather have them?
Yes, there's a lot of things I'd rather have, but it is what it is. Thank you very much.